5:45, that's George Michael, and this is Greatest Hits Radio at Drive Time, and the confessions are here for you. Pass it on, the confessions are back, and if your confession gets read out, then you win a smart speaker. How cool is that? confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That's the email, I repeat, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Sitting in judgment, as ever, Brother Matthew from the Magic Attic, where he is feeling very forgiving because he has the morals of a sewer rat.
Correct.
Slightly sterner, I would say, but only slightly. There's Sister Susie at the pub, ready to pronounce. Are you ready, Sister Susie?
I am ready.
Okay, so, well, tonight's confession is called A Bag of Peas, and there is a moment where you will want to shout that at the radio. Okay, so it's a bit of a call and response thing. Tonight's confession comes from Mystic Mike. I think there's a 12 certificate. 12 certificate.
Good.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Simon and the team, otherwise known as the Forgiving Three. Well, we'll find out. I think not, actually. I feel now is the right time to confess a sin that is nearly 26 years old. My sister-in-law, Anna, all the names have been changed, had two beautiful children, two girls, and she and her husband, Kevin, were desperate to have a boy. Anna and Kevin lived in a fairly isolated part of the UK where folklore was strong. And some of their friends were pseudo-experts because they had actually read a book. So, my sin begins in a fairly unique part of the world where curiosity is a stranger. And so, I must remain anonymous. It feels as though it's like a confession from 226 years ago.
Yeah.
As I said before, Anna and particularly Kevin were desperate that their next baby would be a boy. Now, in my defense, Anna was already synchronizing astrological calendars and biological cycles and phases of the moon to find her optimum time to have a boy. I'm not sure if she was engaged in any post-special time headstands, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. Actually, a handstand might work. I don't know. But anyway, it's a thing. Right, it's a thing.
Right, okay. Move on.
On hearing of my in-laws' efforts, one of my friends found a thesis which speculated that perhaps pregnancy food cravings could give an indication of the baby's gender. And the idea was sweet cravings for no stereotypes here, sweet cravings for a girl, savory for a boy. I gave Anna and Kevin a copy of this thesis, and so a chain of events took off. Anna reasoned that if she conceived after savory food, then the likelihood of a boy was higher. So she started to synchronize calendars and meals to this plan. Life was getting complicated. Now, I must admit I was surprised that they easily accepted my idea that you couldn't find more savory food than spicy curry. I was even more surprised when they believed that I'd seen some research somewhere that airflow and the gentleman's temperature was crucial in deciding the baby's gender. If there was a lack of airflow and everything is too warm, then a girl is likely to be conceived, and obviously the colder the better to conceive a boy. Again, more and more complicated. So many things to coordinate. Before long, my wife was relaying that Anna had replaced all of Kevin's Y fronts and skinny jeans with baggy boxers and almost diaphanous trouserings. Now, I mean, I don't think... Never seen the phrase diaphanous trouserings before.
No,
but it works for me. After
on.
months of gentle encouragement, I discovered that Anna and Kevin had accepted all of my helpful advice. On a regular basis, Anna was synchronizing the calendars, the moon phases, her cycles, setting an alarm, sometimes for the middle of the night, then throwing down a mountain of vindaloo, slapping a pack of frozen peas. A bag of frozen peas, you cry? Onto a nervous Kevin, and then coyly announcing, "Come on then!" Perhaps despite all of these efforts, I have to report Anna did become pregnant, and in 9 months she duly delivered a healthy baby boy. I was hailed as a baby gender guru. And in due course, Anna proceeded to attend coffee mornings, stay and plays, and generally meet the other women and relate the surefire steps that are needed to conceive her boy. Father Simon and the forgiving few, I do not seek forgiveness from Anna or Kevin, as they really should have known my sense of humour better, and they should have realised that hundreds of years of scientific research has failed to plan anything for the baby's gender. This is not possible. But I do, however, seek forgiveness from all the men who followed in Kevin's wake, all those women who attended Anna's talks and were subsequently inflicting the usual mix of calendar, alarm, curry and frozen veg on their partners / husbands. Yours, Mystic Mike. Well, let me tell you, Mystic Mike, before we go any further, that this is how the nonsense starts. This is a 26-year-old story. No internet, no Twitter. Now there'd be a whole movement. I'm part of the calendar, alarm, curry and frozen veg movement. What are you? And so the conspiracies are born. Anyway, that's the way I'm tilting. What do you say, Sister Susie in the pub?
Oh, Mystic Mike, that one's really tickled me. I was like, my cheeks hurt. But do you know what? I just think you were just damn lucky, weren't you, that they actually did have a boy?
Yes, I think so.
Because otherwise it would have been disastrous. But I'm sorry, poor Kevin. Frozen veg, frozen peas.
Yes, frozen veg. After a Vindaloo at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, come on. This is
just. No, I can't forgive him for that. It's just mean. It's just mean. No
forgiveness.
No,
what do you say, Brother Matthew?
I mean, come on. Right, first off, it's 50-50. I hate to be stating the obvious, but it's 50-50, and it came out well. So, revel in it. That's fine. You're right. I think there would be an app now. You would have an app with basically saying, apply the frozen peas now. Boom. Here we go. I'm definitely going to forgive, if for nothing else than post-special time handstands. I mean, come on. So, yeah, forgiven. Definitely.
Okay, it's the people's verdict, though. Do you forgive Mystic Mike? Yes or no, please? On the text 61054. 61054. Start your message with Simon. Everything should work from there. Thank you. 10 minutes ago, we were talking about tonight's confession from Mystic Mike, who, if he was doing this kind of scam thing today, would be selling kits with diaphanous trousers, Vindaloo curry and iced peas all at the same time. What is the people's verdict on Mystic Mike?
So Hazel from Clacton-on-Sea says, oh my goodness, I love this so much. All is forgiven. This really tickled me. Anne Davis in Gloucester, forgiven, if only because my hubby really is called Kevin, and the expression on his face was priceless. Fortunately, baby-making days are long gone. Tony in Redditch says, hilarious confession. 3 o'clock in the morning, then applying garden peas, followed by... I'm not reading that bit out. Well done, that man, says Tony. And finally, Charlie in Great Clacton, not forgiven. Don't think I'd like a pack of frozen peas slapped. I'm not reading that bit either. Well done anyway.
Yes, handstand lessons over here. Thank you very much indeed. We'll include those in the kit. It's Radio Superstition. Standing by for your confession then, Brother Matthew is in the magic attic just checking in.
Yes.
All right, he's there. That was brief and perfunctory. Sister Susie's in the pub just checking in.
Yes.
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 Just because, okay? Just because. That's the only reason why.
That's why.
Just because.
Tonight's confession comes from Mick, and it's called Nice and Sleazy Does It Every Time, for reasons that will become self-evident. Here we go. Father Simon and the felicitous family of forgiveness. By the way, when you've heard it, the people's verdict, please. 61054. First word, Simon. Thank you. Mick says, I most humbly seek your pardon for an unfortunate incident which occurred in the late 1970s when I was a still young and somewhat naive merchant navy cadet at Riversdale College. Together with 2 other miscreants, I embarked on a weekend trip to distant Staffordshire in my trusty, if somewhat basic, Austin 1100, where we were to see the Stranglers in concert at Bingley Hall, staying afterwards at a friend's. The concert was memorable, not least for the usual live Stranglers concert reasons. But afterwards, there's a few photos about that. But afterwards, I emerged virtually deaf, having been near the stage and forgetting earplugs. Meanwhile, my mates had met two girls in the audience and, unknown to me, promised them a lift home in my car with the lure of tea and toast. And I was told that tea and toast was not, in inverted commas, tea and toast. It was tea and toast. That's what it was.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
Close to midnight, I drove from the parking area, deaf and disorientated. I narrowly missed a parking attendant with a struggling car and was guided through dark country lanes to the girls' home. We eventually arrived in a small village, and as I was guided into a completely dark cul-de-sac, I noticed the silhouette of some large, detached houses set back from the road with their own twin drive-in, drive-out drives. We're in classic Stranglers territory here, aren't we? This is
Clearly,
exactly the world they inhabit.
Yeah.
My 2.25 candle power headlights dimly lit the appropriate entrance, and I swung into their drive, intending to park in front of the house. To my growing horror, the depth of my huge mistake became immediately apparent, as with a resounding thump from my unforgiving car suspension, I discovered that the houses were actually semi-detached with single drives, and I had driven across the flower border and onto the lawn. My panic increased as the headlights illuminated their front window, where, because this is where we move into 70s sitcom territory, I saw a man leap out of a chair, pipe in his mouth, the Daily Telegraph flying into the air.
Yes.
It's like a Mac cartoon, this. No doubt the concerned father awaiting his daughter's return somewhat nervously from a Stranglers gig. Heart pounding with cries of dismay from the back seat ringing in my already tender ears, I madly reversed off the lawn, leaving a fresh pair of ruts in the grass and further wrecking the flower border. Containing, I was told later, white and pink begonias, daylilies, orange canna lilies, bellflowers, and ornamental grass. Amid desperate apologies directed towards a shocked mother who'd emerged from the front door, I reversed across the drive, in the process decimating a much-treasured rustic hollow log flower bed, which I couldn't see on the other side of the drive, and parked on the roadway, cut the engine. The girls disembarked, muttering something distinctly unflattering, and my mates looked at me in disbelief. And I said, "Are we still going to get tea and toast?" Well, I can still feel the bruises, Father Simon, I have to tell you. I need forgiveness from the team for my sins, and also from the stressed parents having to repair the damage to their lawn and their borders and their begonias. Also the poor girls who must have endured days and weeks of retribution for inviting 3 clowns back from the concert. Those Navy types. In mitigation, I plead gross naivety, inexperience, and very dim headlights. By the way, years later, I was to embark on a new career in the police, spending 12 years in the traffic department, where my driving skills did actually improve considerably. You'll be delighted to hear. So there's Mick, not his real name. To protect him, he was a copper, but in his early career, as a Stranglers fan, decimated a beautiful lawn full of canna lilies, daylilies, and most importantly, ornamental grass. Sister Susie from the pub, what do you say to Mick?
Well, Mick, I think you were clowns, really, weren't you? How dark was it that you couldn't actually see? Like, were there street lights? I feel like it has to be really dark. And I really like calla lilies and begonias, so I'm sorry, I'm not forgiving.
So a floral-based lack of forgiveness. Brother Matthew, how's it looking from the attic?
I mean, canna lilies, are those, I thought were cannellonis, aren't they? Isn't that something I get from the bakery? It sounds like that to me.
I think it's a type of pasta you're talking about.
Is it pasta? Doesn't sound like a flower to me. I'm going to forgive, and here's the reason. I mean,
yes.
It's the Austin Allegro, isn't it? It's the headlamps. If you can't, there's no point in that headlamps being on if they don't show you when you're about to drive onto the lawn. I feel quite strongly that Mick was let down by his headlamps there, no fault of his own, and tea and toast went begging, and the cannelloni as well. So I'm definitely going to forgive.
It's the Austin 1100, just to be absolutely precise, before the Allegro fans get in touch.
Yeah.
Okay, very clear. So the people's verdict, please, 61054. You start your message with Simon. Do you forgive Strangler Mick? Yes or no? Merely moments ago, we did our tea and toast off to see the Stranglers confession. from Mick, who wrecked a whole bunch of turf, basically, some begonias, some daylilies, and some ornamental grass, all because his Austin 1100 was a little bit darker than it should be. Anyway, it was today's confession. What is the people's verdict? What do they say?
Well, the people's verdict is that they're all forgiving. Catherine says, forgiven. Having grown up in rural Ireland with no sign of a street light in our village, it definitely gets dark, and I may have done something similar. Helen says, I totally forgive. Flowers grow back. It's not as if the poor clown went out and pulled them out by the roots. The Cowans in Edinburgh. Hi, Simon. Forgiven. It was the local council's fault for inadequate street lighting. Anonymous says, in the darkness of night, the parents should have had reflective signs in order to point out their garden borders, which seems a little extreme. But not everyone is forgiving. Linda in Knutsford says, not forgiven, and tea and toast, jog on, loser.
It doesn't sound like the obvious thing. Stranglers concert and then tea and toast afterwards. Anyway, confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And just a word, having read a whole bunch of confessions today, just a reminder of the rules. I say no to 10 pages. I don't need 10 pages. No. Couple of pages is fine. We say no to illegality. Thank you. If it breaks, the law deliberately, then obviously we can't do it. And also, most importantly, no laxatives. Right? Okay. If your confession involves a laxative, it's not going to get on. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 12 minutes to 6. It's confession time. Checking in with Sister Susie in the pub, producing everything and making sure everything's fine.
Yes.
Checking there. Okay. Brother Matthew in the Magic Attic. Checking
all
there.
Fine.
People's verdict. Once you've heard tonight's confession, please, which comes from Joanne and is called Owl and the Fussy Spat, but it could also be called Twit to You too. But anyway, here we go. Father Simon, my confession, this comes from Joanne. Father Simon, my confession goes back to my school days. I've never been very artistic, so absolutely dreaded the compulsory art lessons in middle school. I found it hard to colour within lines, let alone produce a watercolour or a pastel or a charcoal picture that resembled anything like it should do. My talent was so bad that at high school my mum did my art homework and my teacher did most of my art school work. What? I passed GCE art with quite a good grade thanks to them. We're in rich territory here, I think. Homework and art that you never did, but your parents might have done. Anyway, back to middle school. This particular week, we were all excited because we were going to be let loose with clay. We were given a demonstration on making various animals and birds and then sent to our tables with a lump of clay each and told to make an animal or bird of our choice. My friend Jenny and I decided to make owls. I thought, okay, well, I'm never going to be a landscape artist or a portrait artist. Maybe my talent lies in sculpture. An hour later, after squeezing, poking and prodding my lump of clay, I was quite impressed with my slightly wonky but recognisable owl. That is until I saw Jenny's owl. It was perfect. Sitting there on its little birdie feet with its little birdie beak in the air, I looked at my wonky owl and was so upset, I squashed it with my fist, which I regretted immediately. The teacher asked us to scratch our initials on the bottom of our work and then line up to go out for dinner break. As I was quite upset, I took my time washing my hands, wondering how I was going to explain not having an animal or bird to send to the kiln. Whilst the teacher led the class to the dinner hall, I had a brainwave. I could change Jenny's JL initials to my JLM with just one letter M. So I could add an M to the perfect little owl and went off happily to have my dinner. Her work was my work. That night in bed, I started to regret what I had done. I also realised Jenny would recognise her owl and I would be found out. For a week, I worried about what I had done. I lay awake night after night, trying to think of a way out of my dilemma. I finally decided that on the day of my next art lesson, I would be ill. Therefore, I would not have to explain the extra M on Jenny's owl or why I had no owl at all. The standard practice, just pretending you're sick. So the next day of my art lesson came and I told my mum I was ever so sick. I had bad tummy ache. She was having none of it. Off you go to school, she said. I cried and I begged and I pleaded, but I was sent to school. By the time I got to school, I decided the only thing I could do was confess to Jenny and the teacher what I had done and take whatever punishment I was given. And I actually started to feel a bit better. However, Jenny wasn't at school that day, or for the next week because she had chicken pox. So after art class I went, ready to tell the teacher what I had done, but sitting there on the table was this perfect little owl with my initial on the bottom and no Jenny to claim the owl as hers. I lovingly painted that owl and off to the kiln it went. 2 days later we could collect our animals or birds and take them home. So, firstly, I showed my parents my perfect little owl. Then I showed my grandparents. My Nana was so impressed, I let her keep the owl. But every time I went to my grandparents, I would have to look at that perfect little owl that I hadn't made, and it would niggle at me. I would watch my nanny lovingly dust that perfect little owl that I hadn't made, and it would niggle at me a little bit more. That owl sat on my grandparents' mantelpiece until they passed away. What happened to that perfect little owl that I hadn't made then, I don't know, and I never asked. And going back to where my story started, by the time Jenny came back to school, we had moved on to tie-dye T-shirts in art. Oh, well, that's a nice period piece. And Jenny never asked about her perfect little owl that she had made. So I never got found out. 45 years have passed, and somewhere along the way, I lost touch with Jenny. Funny that. But I've never forgotten that I stole her perfect little owl that I hadn't made. Up until now, I'm the only person who knew what happened on that day, but I think it's time I confessed and said how sorry I am for claiming the perfect little owl was mine. Jenny, I am very, very sorry, and I hope the nation will forgive me. Well, fertile territories, I said, parents helping with your homework, skiving off, cheating in art. These are things that we've come across before. Sister Susie, what do you make of Joanne's shocking story?
Well, Joanne, I love that one. We've all been there, I think. But personally, my dad actually used to love to help me with my Eisteddfod entries. Maybe a bit too much, and maybe it was more his work than mine.
Yes.
But we've all been there, and I think you were tortured enough. The fact that you had to see that thing every time you went to your grandma's. So, forgive him for me.
Brother Matthew from the Magic Attic, what do you... I know you're going to forgive anyway, probably because of something to do with the tie-dye T-shirts or something, and it's art.
Well,
and it's
exactly.
Art, yes.
You know, I mean, well, Susie's quite right to say that, number one, which of us could honestly say we'd do anything different? And number two, that Joanne has clearly been punished enough for what happened. But frankly, my understanding of the art world is if you take a blob of clay and then crush it with your fist, as long as you call it futility of hope or something like that, you just sit back and watch the cash roll in. So I am gonna forgive, because we all know that's what it's all about.
Okay, Matt on art. This is a whole TV show in there. People's verdict, please do you forgive Joanne? On the text 61054, you start your message with Simon. It's the people's verdict for tonight's confession, and it's coming up the other side of the news. Merely moments ago, Joanne was telling us her sorry, sordid tale about how she stole her best friend's owl from her art class and claimed it as hers. The people's verdict is in, and Matt has it in front of him. What's it looking like, Matthew?
Yes, Adam Birmingham says, not forgiven, not a jolly hoot. Owlful behaviour. Well done, Adam. Grant in Epsom says, absolutely not forgiven. My husband made an owl when he was at school, and it looked like something the dog brought in. His parents treasured it for 30 years till it went onto a high shelf in the conservatory and then got relegated to the garage. James in Belper, forgiven. I once had to make a clay butterfly that was then fired with pieces of glass in the middle whilst at secondary school. I was very jealous of the really arty kids' delicate butterfly. Mine resembled a patio paving slab. And finally, Sally Hayward says, so forgiven, Simon. Brought back so many memories of my art teacher doctoring my GCSE artwork in the 70s. I hadn't wanted to do art, but it was the only thing on the timetable, and the French teacher didn't want me. My Garden of Eden picture was passed on to another student on our way out of the exam, and I distinctly heard the teacher say, see what you can do with this. I felt Jenny's pain, and her sleepless nights were punishment enough.